Welcome to Marketplace with Charles, where dreams are turned into reality. Marketplace is brought to you by Art of Skincare. Art of Skincare, the company that brings out the beauty in you, as well as Kuwisa Lodge, situated at the heart of Mombalingo Nature Reserve. If tranquility is what you're looking for, then Kuwisa Lodge is the place to be. I am Charles Ngobeni. On Marketplace, we empower and equip you with tools that you need to achieve your entrepreneurial dreams. Here on Marketplace, we create kingdom financiers. Each week we bring you insight from experts in different fields of business, from men and women of faith. Today, we meet an expert in an area of governance, crisis management, and forensics. If you're a South African citizen and you are aware of what's happening around you, you must be aware of things that have been dominating the news headlines over the past year or so that involve a number of business enterprises. There are things that happen in business that, according to the law in place, are neither tolerable nor healthy in the management of business. Guidelines are in place to help regulate the conduct of people. By people, well, I mean the boards and directors that are in business in order to help curb the temptation that men often fall for when they are surrounded by too much money. Good conduct is what you will need to learn about as soon as you become friends and cousins with money. My guest today will talk about some of these important issues that we so need to know in order to continue unhindered in our businesses. Well, I am seated here and very delighted to welcome Pastor Peter Goss, the corporate governance consultant. Help me welcome him in your house and wherever you may be watching this episode from. Prof, welcome to Marketplace with Charles.
Thank you for having us, Charles, and thank you to your listeners for having us.
It is really my pleasure to have you joining the Marketplace.
Our pleasure.
Awesome. Prof, do you mind to highlight to our viewers your business and what you are doing?
Yeah. So we run a niche subject matter expert consultancy.
Yes.
And our specialisms are in crisis management, particularly forensic and anti-corruption crisis management.
Okay.
But the bulk of our business is in the area of corporate governance, advisory services. So we help boards and leadership of companies to put in place governance instruments to mitigate the risks that businesses face. But important message is to note that business is not about managing the risk, rather it's about exploiting the opportunity. So we also have businesses with strategy facilitation to help them leverage opportunities to grow the business. And then finally, what we do, unfortunately, is when the cookie crumbles and something goes wrong, we then get involved in forensic investigation of matters. We do lots of training and facilitation to develop professionals in corporate governance and in forensic matters. Yes.
But why is a strong need for governance in business?
The bottom line is most of us look at the word governance as the means of controlling a business.
Yeah.
One should be very cautious about the term governance. I prefer that we use the term corporate governance.
Corporate governance, yeah.
Why it's important to understand the term corporate governance and why it's important to have good corporate governance is that you'll be able to manage the 4 key quadrants, according to an author called Tricker, on the governing of a business. And one of those quadrants is putting in place a strategy for creating value in your business. So when you say governance, people think control. Actually, business is about opportunity and risk-taking. So the one leg of good corporate governance activity is making sure you have good strategy in place, a vision that you want to explore and achieve, and make sure that you use your resources accordingly. The next element is to have a business plan, various policies that empower your strategy and the success of your strategy. Of course, you then need an oversight and monitoring mechanism, which is often a board of directors, to make sure you're doing the above, the 1 and 2 I've mentioned. And finally, systems to make sure there's accountability for what you're doing in the business. And now, how do you manage accountability? You communicate to your stakeholders. You disclose to your stakeholders. You're transparent about your performance, about your corporate behavior, so that you can be held to account for the success of your business, or, like anything, sometimes does trip for the failings of your business.
Is that mandatory according to law or is voluntary?
A company has a mandatory governance system. We call that substantive governance.
Yes.
So our Companies Act is that substantive governance system. Now, there are various codes that also give guidance on corporate governance, and we call those voluntary governance dispensations. But the substantive governance dispensation, the law that governs your sector, for example, if you work in the electricity sector, you're a company. One, you'd have to comply with the Companies Act. Two, you may have to comply with the Electricity Act, as an example.
Yeah.
So we call that substantive governance. So the number one instrument that you should be complying with as a business person, not complying with, but rather applying. Compliance is not how you run a business. You run a business through applying. And if you have to comply sometimes along the way, yes, indeed, tax laws, companies laws, and other statutory obligations. So substantive governance is where I would encourage people to focus their efforts, particularly in the SME environment and middle market, where you're more entrepreneurial and not obsessed with particular codes of corporate governance as the basis for your business.
Let's talk about the thriving business. You've got this is a great business doing exceptionally well. How does that affect the character of a person?
A lot of us see culture in a business as being the result of behavior alone. No, culture is everything I've said about the sum total of good corporate governance in your business. And that sum total, I repeat, is having the right strategy and vision driven against a backdrop of a value system.
Yeah.
So one is we have an institutional integrity system to govern your business, and we also have a personal integrity system, which is where we then talk about ethics and professional conduct in the business. So this culture of a business is from strategy and vision all the way across to making sure you have business plans complementing this strategy and vision, to make sure you have monitoring and supervision systems to make sure you're behaving, and lastly, make sure you're self-accountable for being a good corporate citizen as a good business.
Prof, talk to us about the guidelines that are in place to help the business leaders or entrepreneurs stay in line as they conduct their business.
Like I said, number one, the average entrepreneur and businessman should be focused on making sure they don't fall foul of the Companies Act. If we are talking about it from a perspective of what instruments you should comply with. Now, there are codes of corporate governance and codes of conduct, voluntary systems that one puts in place to further refine how you make the Companies Act work for you. So amongst those would be codes on corporate governance, and those codes on corporate governance would set out 4 key principles in the main often. One, institutional and personal integrity of your organization, including its leadership. 2, responsibility systems to make sure it's very clear who should be doing what and who is responsible for doing what. 3, making sure that you're fair about how you run your business in relation to your customers. You behave like a good corporate citizen. You make sure you give your customers good value. You look after your employees. And finally, make sure that there's accountability for all of the above. How you establish accountability is through being transparent about the performance of your business, the good news in the business, and sometimes the bad news in your business, the good corporate social behavior of your business. These are the key elements of a good business.
That, for me, sounds like your vision statement or your mission statement, or both.
Well put. Well put. Both. I'm nervous about following the protocol of a strategy in running a business. I think we must have fit for size. I often recommend that the number one thing you need in any business is to have a very clearly defined goal. If you want to call that a vision or a mission, that's up to you. Call it what you want to call it. For me, you must see in the distance there, where am I going? Why am I running this enterprise? What do I want to achieve with this enterprise, and what value do I want to give my customers with this enterprise? Bring your people on board to support you in trying to achieve that vision. So every time you look, it's like driving. If you look down here at the business as just solutions or services and financial well-being, then all you're going to see is money and solution. If you look out there in the distance, your peripheral vision will show you so much more about what your business can achieve for society, for developing young people, for protecting the aged, and for making sure you add comprehensive value in delivering on your corporate governance model. So to me, a corporate governance model is exactly as you summed it up. It's the model that you apply in running your business. You refer to culture. It's the culture that you drive your business by. Yes, you're so right.
We see here in the country a huge failure rate when it comes to SMMEs. Will you say the bad governance contribute to that? Or if it applied correctly, will that reduce the failure rate?
So once again, I'll go back to the danger of the word governance,
Yes,
which is sometimes loosely interpreted to mean control. I don't believe any good business person, I'm not a big fan of the term entrepreneur.
Okay.
Because today's entrepreneur, it seems to me, the flavor of the day is the more you innovate, the more you're supposedly an entrepreneur. Well, I fancy us business people. A businessman, a businesswoman is focused on making sure that the corporate governance system, which is strategically what am I trying to achieve? What plans do I use to achieve that? How do I have somebody watching me as I run this enterprise of mine? And finally, how do I make sure that those that hold me to account are satisfied that I'm doing a good job? So I would focus on applying good business principles as corporate governance, as opposed to what law says I must do what and not do what. You don't run a business on that basis. Business is about seeking opportunity to win and believing in that opportunity. Incidentally, you must follow certain statutes in doing so. I like to call it incidentally. Because business is about running with the opportunity and winning and seeing the vision up there and chasing that vision, as opposed to saying, the law says I can't, the law says I can. I don't run a business on that basis. No, you run a business on the basis of chasing opportunity, getting your people to believe in that opportunity, showing your clients value from your opportunity, and nurturing that opportunity for long-term sustainability. That's good corporate governance in a well-run organization.
We've got these guidelines that has been established. What do you think led to this establishment?
You know, we have a code in South Africa which I don't like to tout. I'm not a big believer in touting other people's instruments. But since 1994, we've had 4 iterations of a code of corporate governance, for example. Well, you know, corporates who should comply with those codes quite strictly aren't doing it very well, exactly. So I wonder how well these codes are doing. For me, it's all about driving a value system, a morality system in the organization, and being very clear on what you're trying to achieve with your organizations. I didn't answer you on the question, why do SMEs not succeed? It's because they often have no vision. They often don't know what the end game might look like. If you start a business, you should be asking yourself, how will this look in 5 years' time? How will this look in 10 years' time? I admire the Chinese. They think in 20-year horizons. So if you want to have a business, you shouldn't be thinking about what I'll make over the next year. That's incidental. You should be thinking about what ambition will we achieve? What vision will we achieve over the next 10 years? So many entrepreneurs are very short-sighted.
And yet we should think generationally.
We must think longer term. Some people like the term legacy. I'm not a big believer in that. I think legacy is determined for you, not by you. The day you're done, people will say, he or she left a legacy. But if you're running your business thinking every year you're leaving a legacy, I'm a bit concerned that you're self-serving. Your legacy will be the outcomes of your business.
Look, we're living in a fast world today. Everything changes quickly. You know, how does this affect these guidelines? These
guidelines, for example, in Germany, codes of corporate governance are reviewed every 2 years in the German model. Other dispensations even look at their codes annually. Some have no structure. In South Africa, we have no structured timeline for reviewing our corporate governance frameworks. So our dominant instrument is the Companies Act 2008 in South Africa. If you look at that act, keep it next to you all of the time, in and of itself, it gives you some ideas of what you need to mitigate or address as you run your business.
So the Companies Act is like your Bible?
In my opinion, the Companies Act is your Bible, and otherwise go and look at what other entrepreneurs do to run their businesses. But if you're saying that I'm going to go and look at a code to tell me how to run my business, all you do is over-control yourself. Business is not about, it is about restraint, but it's also about exploiting opportunity.
What systems do we have in place to oversee the regulation and implementation of these guidelines currently in South Africa?
So you have, for example, compliance with tax law. So tax law is is within that universe of complying with company laws. Complying with CIPC regulations to make sure, CIPC is Companies and Intellectual Properties Commission, making sure your company complies with lodging certain returns on a regular basis, making sure you comply with labor laws. I caution the term compliance once again, making sure that you're conversant with these laws so that you can leverage them for your business to succeed. So these are the multiple instruments, and there are many others depending on your sector. For example, if you're in mining, you'd have to comply with mining and environmental protection laws, amongst many others. But I keep emphasizing, a business owner should be concerned with leveraging opportunity and building value, and have somebody in the back office reminding him of these issues of compliance and making sure that you don't fall foul of how you should be running a company in line with the laws in our country.
As a professor, do you think we need more in South Africa, or is what we have enough? Like, for instance, we've been debating with the CRL. The CRL wants to regulate Christianity. And we are saying to the CRL, we don't need to regulate Christianity. We have got enough laws, to control our borders, to control our books, to control our texts, to control everything. Why should we regulate religion whilst we have got enough laws? And in your opinion, do you think we have got enough laws, not necessarily based on religion, but based on the topic of today? Or is there anything more that we can add to it?
We need no more laws to regulate nothing else in South Africa.
Yeah.
We're in a best-of-class country when it comes to documented frameworks and laws for how we should run even issues of morality and social behavior. So if you're going to regulate Christianity, are you going to regulate atheists too? Would be my counter question. So do you leave the atheist out if you want to regulate the Christian? So I think one needs to look at this term religion way more broadly if you want to get down the path of regulation. Christianity and religion is about morality. So one needs to be very careful if you want to start regulating morality. You've got to develop something a lot more intense than a law or a system of compliance. You can't comply with morality. It's a conscience type of behavior. So I don't believe that writing laws is where we should be going when it comes to religion and the like.
But I think this is my own opinion. We lack what I would call supervision to whatever we have, or enforcement to the rules and the regulations which are there. Will I be correct if I say that? Because if you look into the state capture, had someone looked and make sure that whatever we have is enforced, wouldn't be in this situation.
I think that what works very well, let's take in any jurisdiction, the strongest part of the economy in any jurisdiction around the world will be its listed companies, publicly listed companies environment. Now, what is the great characteristic of the listed environment? A philosophy called self-regulation, where the industry regulates itself. Same with, I believe, a matter like religion. You establish a self-regulatory environment and a self-regulatory framework. It is the most effective, as opposed to somebody writing a law and saying, follow that law.
And the doctors are self-regulatory.
Absolutely.
And they're doing very well.
I have good fortune
lawyers as well, self-regulatory, are doing very well.
I have the good fortune to work with the South African Medical Association, for example, 16,000 medical doctors, and I help them advise them on corporate governance. I've written some of their corporate governance instruments, for example. A very good example of how professionals regulate themselves. So if we wouldn't want to say we want to professionalize religion, but if there is a need to have some sort of governing code of conduct and framework for the entire environment, then of course it doesn't hurt to have a self-regulatory approach. But if government's going to step in and police it, this is the problem. The more you write laws, the more you set out an obligation to police those laws. So what you're going to do is write the law and you're not going to police it. Now, I'd love to see how we're going to police churches. By church, I do not mean Christianity only. I'd love to see how you're going to police churches. So writing more laws is not going to be the solution. We need to encourage a culture of self-regulation. We'll be in business.
But what is the reach of the corporate governance best practice where people outside the sphere of business are concerned?
Very shallow. Very shallow. It is the organized, listed business environment that is the strongest in implementing voluntary corporate governance instruments and even laws that prevail over them. That's why you see financial services, for example, being such a strong industry insofar as its governance is concerned. It is highly self-regulated, but also highly regulated by government. So a balance between government regulation and self-regulation is the healthy type of regulation, not one dominating the other. Because when you have the two, it's inclusive. Anything inclusive tends to succeed. Yep.
Will you say this needs to be included in our curriculum, especially maybe even at the high school level?
The argument of starting with corporate governance, morality, ethics, value systems at the fundamental education phase, even grade R, I wouldn't wait for high school, right down at the fundamental level, I think it's critical. We grow up as Christians, for example, knowing that you start the day at school with prayer. Now, apparently, that's questionable in terms of our constitution, that you start the day at school with prayer. I don't think prayer necessarily means one particular religion. We could all have a moment of introspection in the morning as we arrive at school and engage with your God, as it were, in the context of your own religion. I don't know why that is somehow frowned upon in a constitutional democracy. It shouldn't be frowned upon. It should be the order of the day, because it's really about morality. It's not about which God is the right God.
Prof, what scope of business participants do the corporate governance best practice cover?
Our dispensation tries to cover all types of organizations. However, SMEs, for example, you mentioned that as an example. If you were to implement a corporate governance framework applicable to a large corporate to an SME, that SME would not survive a year. The cost of corporate governance is just too expensive. You've got to encourage voluntary governance and fit for size. And that fit for size is we as SME type organizations with a corporate flavor are focused on the purpose of business. The purpose of business is to take risk and create value, not to control risk. Take risk, create value. In creating that value, you'll be exposed to a few risks along the way. Yes, have measures in place to mitigate those risks as they emerge. Sometimes you foresee them too. So for me, I don't think that we should be putting down a template for corporate governance. I think what we should be encouraging is allow the entrepreneur, as it were, allow the businessman, as it were, to express themselves, to be visionary in reaching. And they know what they should be making sure they adhere to or leverage. And that's the Companies Act for any business. So you want the question answered on where should I look for running my business the right way? The Companies Act.
Okay. But currently, do we have any consequences for contravening this best practice?
Oh, there are stringent measures for contravening the Companies Act. I mean, you could be charged with statutory fraud for not complying with the Companies Act. You could be charged with statutory fraud for not complying with submission of your tax returns on time, for not declaring your income fully. You could be charged with, again, not complying with the law, for not lodging certain returns. So the implications are already out there. That we need more, that there's a particular one over and above the law that's more important, certainly not.
Yes, you are a prof. And obviously you wrote some books. Which ones are those?
So let's take one step back on this prof issue. I'm actually a professor of practice at the University of Johannesburg.
Oh, awesome.
Yes. So what does this mean? The University of Johannesburg then takes up this position of identifying subject matter experts in the market. So the Senate would consider the subject matter expert and the contribution of the subject matter expert to the discourse in their area of expertise and look at the profile this person has put out there and how much of perhaps a role model they could be to others. So being a professor of practice, it means I'm a practitioner who's been recognized by an academic institution as being an expert practitioner. So I prefer to call myself a prac-academic. A practitioner academic, it's my own term, prac-academic. In fact, I've just submitted a proposal to a major university to help them get academics more orientated to the practitioner side of things. So academics generally teach our children. the theory of things. Well, our children leave a varsity and suddenly they're unemployed or working in a call center with a BCom degree because they're not empowered with the practitioner side. So we play it as academics.
Okay.
So we live in practice and academia strengthens us in our practices. So to your question around what it takes for young people, how can we advise young people in growing their businesses as they go forward? I think you must get a balance between the practical side and the academic side. And it doesn't hurt to find a professional mentor to support you. On that score, what I normally advise, I've been inundated over the years with what I call requests for role model mentoring. It's perhaps the worst kind of mentoring. Role models make terrible mentors. Why? They don't make time for their mentees enough. So I've professionalized my mentorship. So I have a solution which we charge out at an hourly rate called professional mentoring. So my logic is, you put some skin in the game, I put some skin in the game, we'll make you succeed. So business is about win-win. If you're going to go chasing role models as a young entrepreneur or a mature entrepreneur and think that that person is going to invest in your business, I get people who sometimes call me and say, I need to write a business plan. Can I see you on Saturday? Let's write my business plan. Listen, mate, I've got to run a number of priorities. I've got other people closer to me that have been running with me, that have been protecting me and padding me in our win-win relationship. Where's the new win-win relationship between me and you? Can we establish that? Then we can see how we can guide you.
Tell me, Prof, if someone wants to get hold of the academic,
yes,
how do they do that now?
So the academic, you asked about his books earlier on. I've written 3 books, and each of them start with the word guidance for. Forensic investigation, step-by-step guidance for. Fraud risk governance, step-by-step guidance for. And my last book was on corporate governance and illicit conduct. You'll find me at on my website, www.petergoss.co.za.
And I'm Charles Ngobeni signing off on Marketplace. You will find me on charlesngobeni.com, Instagram Charles_Ngobeni, or you follow me on my Facebook. You can go there and like me. Well, God bless you. See you next time, same channel.
Join Marketplace with Charles on an 11-day tour of the Holy Land from the 8th of December 2019. Take the route Israel traveled to the Promised Land, cross over the Red Sea, and float on the Dead Seas, the lowest point on earth with amazing healing properties. Experience the vibe of Jericho and cruise on the Sea of Galilee to Capernaum, the hometown of Jesus. Visit the pools of Bethesda, Nazareth, Bethlehem, and many more. Walk where Jesus walked and see the Bible come alive. If beautiful memories and an enriched spirit is what you are looking for, then join us in taking Jesus to the Marketplace. For more information, call us on +27 72 123 0078 or email israel@artofskincare.co.za.